Steve here. It's the show where I answer your questions, and this week my first question comes from W. Mark Locker. Steve, I was interested to hear a while back that one of your favorite classic TV series was All in the Family. Although the show didn't interest me very much when it aired as I was a child, it later became one of my favorites as well. I was curious to know your thoughts on if the show should have remained around as long as it did. I thought it lost something after season 7 when the Stivicks moved into the Jeffersons' house, as most of the episodes then only involved a part of the main cast as opposed to them all working off each other together. Not to say it still didn't have some good episodes, especially some very good character development shows for the characters. However, I think, in my opinion, the 9th season and the following Archie Bunker's Place marked an ever-increasing waning down. P.S. I think they should have stuck with Penny Marshall as their pick for the character Gloria. Thanks. Oh, I don't know. I really can't picture anybody other than Sally Struthers playing Gloria. I'm sure Penny Marshall would have been fine, but it would have been a very different show than the one we got. I mean, do you think you could have cast All in the Family better than the people who actually cast it? Sure, we all do. Just a little riff on Sally Struthers' post All in the Family career. Yes, I agree with you. I think All in the Family / Archie Bunker's Place ran far too long, and this actually gives me an opportunity to talk about one of my favorite subjects as a TV critic, which is shows that outlast, that run beyond their natural endpoint. Natural endpoints are a major thing for me when it comes to long-running shows. I firmly believe that every show built into its premise has a natural endpoint. And that's the point at which the show should end, right? If you have a series about characters who are in high school and you start in your first episode with them coming into high school on first day of their freshman year, then the natural endpoint of that show is them graduating high school, period. That's when the show should end. That's when the story is over, all right? With All in the Family, I think the natural endpoint for that show was not when the Stivicks moved next door to the Jeffersons' old house, but when they moved to California and they left the show entirely. I think that should have been the last episode of the series. That was the natural endpoint, because the show up to that point had been about the Archie versus Mike conflict, with Edith and Gloria kind of stuck in the middle and trying to be the voices of reason. And when Mike and Gloria and Joey left and moved to the other side of the country, that should have been the series finale. Because after that, the show is over. You know? So yes, I agree with you. I think it ran too long. I think it was a classic show. I think it was a magnificent show, incredibly well written, so funny, so well acted by everybody in that main cast, and the supporting cast as well was just phenomenal. One of my very favorite shows ever. But yeah, it ran probably about 2 or 3 seasons too long. Ahoy, no. After pregnancy, there's a long time of recovery. Last time, there were some complications. When my child was about 3 months old, I realized that some anti-feminist arguments were starting to make sense to me. And just like that, they were gone when my wife was fully healed. I also remembered I had some anti-feminist thoughts back when I was still a virgin that just evaporated when I met my first girlfriend. I don't like the virgin argument. It's cheap and immature. I don't ever say it to an anti-fem. But I want to hear your thoughts. How much of anti-feminism is inspired by sexual frustration? I would say a good bit of it. I would not say all of it, because there are quite a few vocal anti-feminists online who, from all appearances, presumably have at least active, if not, incredibly satisfying sex lives, who have just absolutely vile attitudes toward women, who are just grossly misogynistic. So I don't think that sexual frustration is all of it. I think some of it is also an incredibly self-centered worldview, having things sort of revolve around you and your desires and your opinions, and reacting very badly to anything that sort of pulls you out of that. But yeah, I think sexual frustration is a part of it, and is probably a primary motivating factor for a lot of folks who wind up in the anti-feminist sphere. Yeah, I mean, look at how openly frustrated some of them are. They tweet things or post things about why don't women like me? Why don't girls go out with me? Why won't anyone have sex with me? There's an open expression of sexual frustration from a lot of them, where they haven't had very much success with the opposite sex, and so they blame it on the opposite sex. They don't chalk it up to just bad luck or something about themselves that isn't connecting with women that they like. They blame the other side. They blame women in general and say, oh, they're not giving me something that they owe me. It gets twisted into that sense of sexual entitlement. So I think it's a big part of it. Is it all of it? Certainly not. It's much more complicated than that, and it definitely varies from person to person as to how much that is a factor, or if that's even a factor at all. But yeah, with a lot of folks that I see in the anti-feminist side, it's very much a factor. Scott Bresinger, there's this long-running atheist blog I read, authored by a self-professed liberal in a red state. Over the past couple of years, it's become increasingly clear that he's in the liberal but not progressive camp. He's all for a single-payer health system and cracking down on Wall Street, but suspicious of feminism and Black Lives Matter. Basically what some people refer to as classical liberalism. I've tried to make the case for progressivism in the comments section, but to no avail. It recently occurred to me that as a person in a deeply conservative state, he has little or no exposure to progressive ideas except for random people yelling at him on Twitter. The progressive movement is basically an alien concept to him, and his version of liberalism seems to be slipping away. My question to you is, do you think this partly explains why people who should be our allies turn so hostile? And do you think there's any way we can bring them up to speed? Yes, I do think that explains some of it, and it kind of ties in with something that I said in answer to the previous question about anti-feminists. I think some of it is also people reacting badly when their very self-centered worldview is challenged. I think a lot of these folks who are white people, who are cis hetero people, who have this deep-seated hostility toward racial justice activists or LGBTQ activists or feminists. A lot of it comes from them having a very self-centered worldview, and whenever they see systems that they benefit from challenged, they take that as a personal insult to them. They look at feminists being activists and advocating against sexism, and they feel personally convicted. They feel like they're being accused of something. And sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not, but they just feel like they are. They get naturally very defensive because they have a very self-centered worldview. And also, I think that you're right. If you are alone or part of a relative minority in an overwhelmingly conservative right-wing environment, yeah, your exposure to progressive organizations, to progressive speakers, to progressive ideas and proposals may be somewhat limited. And you may feel like it's not real, like there isn't really a progressive community or a progressive movement. It's just college students or people whining on Tumblr, or these sort of stereotypical right-wing caricatures of what progressives and social justice activists are. Just a bunch of kids just pissing and moaning about stuff on the internet. It's not real. They're not really accomplishing anything. And I think that's probably part of it too. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that it feels very alienating to be a somewhat liberal left-wing person surrounded by conservatives, and to also feel alienated from progressives on the internet. I'm sure that it's not fun at all, and I think that does explain a lot of it. Robert Ramirez, I am just wondering what advice you could give about one's sexual activity. I have only been intimate with 3 girls. I'm in my 20s and play a team sport that I am engaged in weekly and travel frequently with. I love it. It's my escape. However, I'm not like most of my teammates. They are the type that can meet a girl and take that girl home later on. I, on the other hand, have always felt I need to be in a relationship. And also, I can't do anything till I feel true feeling for the girl. Sometimes I feel weird or ashamed when I can't partake in the extracurricular like they do. I literally just can't. I can't function that way. I get female attention, but especially when it's obvious what the purpose is behind the attention, it's just so hard to conservate. I think they might mean consummate. Even now, being older, I find it harder to date when I just really don't have an interest after my last ex. I know this is a little long and sounding like I'm rambling, so I'll just ask for help and any advice you could offer. Thanks, Steve. Well, just, to make sure that we both know where we stand, I've only been intimate with 4 people in my life, and I'm 37. So I from where I sit, you don't have anything to be ashamed of, and certainly that's not the ssort of thing you should feel pride or shame in either. Anyway, I mean, the number of people you have sex with is a fact of your life that it should neither be brag worthy or shame worthy. I hated dating, right? I had a relatively long-term relationship. And then we broke up, and then I had kind of a short-term relationship, and then we broke up, and then there was a stretch for a few years before I met my wife where I was kind of sporadically dating, and I just hated it. You don't have to feel bad or feel like you're less of a person because you're not the type of guy who can just run right out and pick up girls and get laid whenever he wants. Like there's nothing necessarily wrong with that as long as you're not taking advantage of people, but that doesn't mean that's the way you should want to be or you have to be if that's not the way you are or if that's not the way you want to be. The way you are is just fine. So I don't know what advice I can give you other than just try to be mindful of the fact whenever you're down in the dumps or you're having a bad day or you're lonely, don't beat yourself up for the way you feel like you need to have a relationship, have an emotional connection with a partner before you want to have sex. That's not anything to be ashamed about. There's nothing the matter with the way you are. And hopefully that'll help. Zeleny Sock. So I watched your I'm a liberal because video, and while I agree with most stuff, I'm somewhat disappointed by your support of capitalism. While I think your support of the living wage and collective bargaining are far better than supporting capitalism without them, I want to ask, have you considered the view that bosses shouldn't exist? That there should be democracy in the workplace, people ruling themselves while working, which is how most people spend most of their waking hours, instead of just obeying owners and managers, whom additionally they enrich by their labor? Actually, an additional view I want to ask about, one that people shouldn't professionally get money, let alone get rich, by virtue of owning stuff, like renters, moneylenders, and royalty chargers. In my opinion, those 2 views would constitute anti-capitalism, and I think both of these views should be held not only for themselves, but also as a necessary practical condition for the application of a value you mention, of the government being a tool of the people, because as long as the rich exist, it will be their tool, and not a tool of the people. I think this is a point where we butt up against the limits of my radicalism. Because philosophically, I agree with it's just such a drastic change that I'm reluctant. You know what I mean? I'm reluctant to throw my lot in with that and to say yes, that's what we have to do. Maybe part of it is also that I see certain improvements that could be made to the current system that would make things so much better and would be so much easier to implement that I would rather push for them. And then hope once we get those, we can go for more radical change after that. It feels like overturning capitalism is something that could be a good thing and could be beneficial to a lot of people. But from where I sit, I'm like, well, that's great. But I mean, can we just get $15 an hour minimum wage? Can we do that? Can we strengthen unions and collective bargaining? Can we get a universal basic income for people? These are things that I think could be implemented within the current general economic system that would be hugely beneficial. And once we have those in place, then maybe people who see how much better life is when the working people have more control over their lives and more money in their pockets, then maybe we can push toward a more radical change in our economy. But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm just too much. I'm just too timid at this point, to have like a full-throated support of overthrowing capitalism, and that's on me. That's my own timidity and cowardice, I guess you could say. But that's probably the reason why I'm not more of a radical, let's overthrow capitalism voice. Joe McClory, your malice and incompetence ramble got me thinking. I feel like in many ways the administration's incompetence is getting in the way of the GOP's more malicious policies, and, well, most of their policies, really. Do you think that the shame the administration brings to many Americans is worth the slowing of the harm their policies would cause if they were able to more effectively jam through all the things they want to do? Do you ever think that the bumbling is preventing harm, or these policies are so disliked that the administration were trying to really sell them instead of being distracting and intentionally objectionable to all but their base, they would still not get through? Well, I think in terms of the congressional side of things, the fact that the policies are so widely disliked by such a large segment of the public is the reason why they haven't been able to put them through. I mean, I chalked that up in that video to incompetence, because it's like, you know, you control both houses of Congress. Why can't you get a bill passed that you all have wanted to pass for 7 years? And that seems incompetent to me. But at the same time, I think a lot of it is also due to how hated those policies are, and how the Republicans know that if they pass this bill and they repeal the Affordable Care Act, and it goes south the way most people predict it will, if that happens, that they will be blamed for it. They know that these are unpopular and unwanted policies, and so they push right up to the edge of the cliff, but then they're not willing to take the leap. I think that is sort of shielding us from the full brunt of their malice. But God, what a fucking situation to be in, right? Where your saving grace from a willfully malicious group of people in charge of the legislature and the executive branch is that they all just suck. They're evil, awful, mean-spirited, malicious people, but they haven't been able to do a lot of what they want to do because they're just that fucking incompetent. Whew. It's not a very good situation to be in. It's a very precarious, very frightening situation to be in. To think, oh gee, I hope they don't ever get their shit together. Because if they ever got their shit together, we're really doomed. Yeah, so anyway, time for me to get my shit together and move on to the next part of this video, which is a little something I like to call the lightning round. Troubleshooter 125. Steve, we recently lost another great in June Foray, who gave life to hundreds of characters over the years, including Rocky the Flying Squirrel and Natasha Fatale, Tweety Bird's Granny, Witch Hazel, and too many others to count. I'm saddened by her passing, as I was when Mel Blanc died, and I wondered if you had any comment about this wonderful woman and voice actor. Oh yes, absolutely. She also was the voice of Talkie Tina, the evil doll on the classic Twilight Zone episode, Living Doll, starring Telly Savalas, one of my favorites. And yeah, she was amazing. She was one of the great voice-over talents ever. I think somebody once said that she was the female Mel Blanc, and then I think it might have been Stan Freberg, who she worked with a lot, corrected them and said, actually, Mel Blanc was really the male June Foray. So I think that says just about all you can say about her. She was just a legend, and yeah, she will be missed. Her body of work speaks for itself. She was just a tremendous talent. Some random geek. Anime. I love anime. Steve, do you watch? What anime shows or movies have you seen, if any? What are some of your favorite anime? Love the channel. Thank you very much. Well, I think as I mentioned on our Patreon hangout over the weekend, I haven't watched a lot of anime like super seriously for a long time, but I was really into Cowboy Bebop when I was in my anime phase. I loved Cowboy Bebop. I loved the animation, I loved the writing, I loved the music. I just thought it was one of the best things I had ever seen. And that was really the only show that I got like super heavy into. I also, as far as movies, I mean, all of the ones that everybody loved, like Princess Mononoke and what's the other one? Howl's Moving Castle, Spirited Away. You know, all of the sort of big mainstream crossover hits from the last 15 or 20 years. And Wings of Oniyamas, I think I've mentioned a few times in the past. Just brilliant. Grave of the Fireflies. Ugh, just wrenching. So yeah, those are some of my favorites. Matt Machado. Steve, I found out the truth about you. Steve Shives is actually a lizard person from the 9th dimension, sent here to take over the world. When will you admit the truth? Steve Shives is a reptilian. Don't be silly. I'm not a reptilian. You silly snake. Joshua Purvis, hi, my question is, what do you think of the new Avengers coming out and the new Thor? Thanks, Steve. The new Thor looks like a ton of fun. I mean, I haven't seen much beyond just like behind the scenes stuff about the new Avengers, but it sounds cool. I mean, I'm definitely going to see it. I'm definitely looking forward to it. And the trailer for the Thor Ragnarok movie looks just awesome. Looks so much fun. I watched that, and then I watched the Justice League trailer, and gee, guess which one I'm more excited about? The Thor movie looks like it could be really good. Bruce Bartup, I recently came across a site of feminists who were dead against the Gal Gadot Wonder Woman. This startled me. I thought it and she were great. It transpired that they were very keen on the comic book version. It seems it really helped them in their younger lives as women to strongly identify with that more kick-ass character. Might this explain the broflake phenomenon? How would you feel if DC found on market research that a 2-to-1 reverse gender ratio was preferable for the first of the Justice League trio and so decided to switcheroo Batman to Batgirl permanently? Empathy gland active? Well, the problem is with the broflakes who would react poorly to that is that they have plenty of other strong male role models. I mean, the reason why women, I think, attach themselves so strongly to Wonder Woman is because she was one of the only strong female characters like that they had. Whereas even if they said, you know what, we're going to push Batman and Superman off to the background and we're going to make it more about Batgirl and Supergirl from now on, I mean, that might annoy some people who are like super big Batman and Superman fans, but the truth is, as men, we have plenty of other role models to look to. So it's not quite the same thing. And personally, like I said last week, if the story was good, I wouldn't really care. If they said, we're going to focus more on Batgirl instead of Batman. We're going to try to give our female readers something to latch onto, or attract more female readers. As long as the writing was good and the story was good, I would have no problem with it. I think that would be terrific. Hello there, friend. What is intersectionality? Okay, very quickly. Intersectionality is the idea that people experience discrimination and inequality on the basis of different marginalized identities that they may have simultaneously. And the inequality that they experience, for instance, if a person is, let's say a person is black and also has a disability and is also gay. So they will experience inequality on the basis of their blackness, on the basis of their being disabled, and on the basis of their being gay, right? But these three forms of inequality and oppression will intersect in them, in their life, and will serve to amplify and magnify each other. And that is what intersectionality means. It's about recognizing the way various forms of oppression intersect in the lives of people with multiple marginalized identities, and how that oppression can amplify and become much worse, or at least be experienced in a much different way based on the various identities that you have that are marginalized. So it's about recognizing the social complexities of inequality and discrimination, basically. You should probably Google, is your Google machine broken? You should probably look it up and do some reading, because it's actually pretty interesting. And I think it's a very important idea for people to understand. Samuel Sturgill, Steve, do you think WWE Undertaker could handle being an actual Undertaker at a funeral home? I hear it is a very depressing job. I think Taker could handle it. Something tells me I think Taker would be okay. If anything, he could just no-sell his emotions. Just like he no-sold most people's offensive moves in the early 90s when he was coming up. That's what got him over, was no-selling. So he could no-sell the grief, no-sell the sadness. I think Taker could do that. Jay Dottify. Steve, quick one for you on Friday. What do you think of A, Lawrence Krauss, and B, Matt Dillahunty? I listen to podcasts, YouTube talks all the time at work, and they both come up quite a lot. I like the way that MD breaks something down in detail, and he generally manages to not be personally insulting to people. Generally. Well, I've never met Lawrence Krauss, so I can't speak about him personally. I've read a couple of his books and thought they were good. I've heard some not so nice things about him in person, and some not so nice things about his behavior. I won't go any further than that. So that gives me kind of a not so bright view of him. But as for Matt Dillahunty, I've met him in person once, I think. He was a lovely guy. We talked about Star Trek for a few minutes. And yeah, in terms of his work, yeah, I think he's a really sharp thinker and a really good debater. And you're right, he has a way of really breaking down arguments and cutting right to the heart of things. And he's a really smart guy. And I like Matt. I like Matt a lot. There you go. That's it for the questions. It's time now for the shout out. The shout out this week. Hey, did you hear that the poem on the base of the Statue of Liberty is just basically shit? That apparently is the position of the Trump administration, that the Emma Lazarus poem, the New Colossus, that is printed on the base of the Statue of Liberty, one of the most beautiful expressions of what makes America great and the immigrant experience and the melting pot, and how our diversity is our strength, you know, the American dream, what made America the dream of immigrants all across the world once upon a time. It's dog shit. Forget it. According to Stephen Miller, one of the more odious members of the incredibly odious Trump administration. So the shout out this week, in light of that and in light of a new proposed immigration law, immigration policy from the Trump administration that would savagely curtail immigration to this country, my shout out this week goes to the National Immigration Law Center, which is an organization dedicated to defending the rights of low-income immigrants. Immigration and the rights and liberties of immigrants, both the ones that want to come to this country and the ones that are already here, have been under assault since January 20th of this year, when this administration came to power. It is disgusting and shameful and disgraceful and un-American the way immigrants have been vilified and demonized and attacked by the Trump administration and the supporters and enablers of the Trump administration. It is foul and disgusting. And I think that those of us who recognize it as such should be standing up and supporting the immigrants that live among us, that are a part of our communities, a part of our society, and also those who wish to come to this country to add their voices, to add their lives and their experiences to our common American experience, which is what the United States has always done and has always been at its very best. I think we should be supporting immigrants, and we should be supporting organizations that help immigrants, like the National Immigration Law Center. So that is the shout out. You can go to nilc.org to learn more about that particular organization. And I strongly encourage all of you to be supportive of immigrants in the United States, and of immigrant activism and organizations that work to defend and stand up for and represent immigrant interests in this incredibly perilous time, where they are threatened more than they probably have been for a very, very long time. So there you go. That's the shout out, the National Immigrant Law Center. I also want to remind you, as always, to listen to the Lemmy Listen family of podcasts. These are podcasts that are created by my very good friend Jason Harding, the puppet master of Opinionville. There's a whole bunch of amazing Lemmy Listen podcasts. They're all worth your time and attention, but I want to draw your attention specifically to the Late Seating podcast, which is co-hosted, not coincidentally, by me. That's the main reason why I want to draw your particular attention to that, because it's the one that I'm on. And the Late Seating podcast is a belated movie review podcast where we take a fresh look at films that have a certain reputation, either for being good or bad, and we give them a fresh review. We go through the synopsis and make fun of them a little for our own entertainment and hopefully for yours as well. And then we decide if we think the movie deserves whatever reputation it has, whether that reputation is good or bad. And if you listen today, our new episode drops the very day that this video is published, and it is our review of the 1968 classic sci-fi adventure film, the original Planet of the Apes. With the new Planet of the Apes movie coming out recently, with interest in the Planet of the Apes franchise on the rise these last couple years, we thought it would be fun to go back and look at the original classic Planet of the Apes, starring Charlton Heston, co-written by the legendary Rod Serling. And check it out. You can hear our review of Planet of the Apes. You can listen to all of our past episodes of Late Seating and all of the episodes of all of the awesome Lemmy Listen podcasts by going to lemmylistenpodcast.com. That's it for me, everybody. I'm out of here for another week. I want to remind you, as always, to please leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. But in order for me to do this, you have to ask. So please do comment on this video with your question for next time. And I will answer as many of them as I possibly can. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time. Take care. Hey folks, one more thing before I go. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron of this channel. Thanks once again for watching, and I will see you